be stronger than the average male. That's just part of the curve. Many males are going to be weaker than the average female. It's a population curve, and it's a predisposition that discusses populations. So, for example, I had a girl, we called her Amazon girl. Her name was Sydney. She was way out here. So, when she quit gymnastics at 17 and went to university, she weighed 126 pounds. And in order to challenge her, we would put a weight belt around her waist, and she would put a 25-pound weight plate, and a 10-pound weight plate between her legs, and do perfect pull-ups. Now, a perfect pull-up means you can't do this. You have to pull up purely from the side like this with your ribs mostly in, and you can't jerk it up. Now, none of us can do this. Maybe you can. You're pretty strong. Very few could do this. That's an incredible ability. She could do 12 of them without really breaking a sweat. That's extraordinary. I could never do that. But why was she so strong? Well, there's two components here. The first time I saw her, she was about 7 years old, and I was coaching a team, and I saw what's called a recreational class, like a fun class, and I see this little kid running away, and she's got a V-back. Now, when you're 7, guess what you don't have? A V-back. That doesn't happen. And I automatically, so you always do this, I said to the coach, I want to talk to that kid's parents at the end of class. Now, here's what's really weird. When I met that kid's mom, what did she look like? She was, you have to be small, short, she had a V-back. She was massively powerful. And I was like, Sydney, I want her on team. So there's two things that happened. She was already out here. How do I know? Because her mother. You can't make that happen except by steroids or genes to actually look like that. So she was already out there. And then what did I spend the next 11 years or 10 and a half years of Sydney's life doing? Condition the fuck out of her every day. So there is nature and nurture all in one package. And then there's a larger population argument. Who knows about Title IX? All right, one person, two persons, three persons. So Title IX comes in the 1960s. It's extraordinary law. It's completely changed history in the United States. So in the 1950s and 60s, you have the beginning and the building of civil rights. And all of a sudden, women who are beginning to be freed from kind of the drudgery of the automatic sex. Yes.
Kind of like what they would call talent is more like a thing that they just are inherently good at, and then learning to craft it better is practice.
Correct. Yes. So you take a talent, an innate character, and then you train it more, and it pushes it out even further. Exactly. And I'm going to actually talk about that right now. So Title IX comes along when women are somewhat released from some of the bases of sexism. I don't know if you noticed in the 1950s, a woman could not get a car loan or a home loan without having her husband or her father sign for it. So, I mean, this is a terrible era. Well, women wake up one day and they're like, hey, we're not allowed to play sports. And I mean, we're not allowed to play sports. There are no locker rooms. There are no coaches. There are no uniforms. There are no leagues. There's no fields for them. There's no companies that will make uniforms or equipment for them. Nothing. It's really weird. So Title IX was extraordinary law. It said if you're going to provide facilities for males and uniforms and leagues, and if companies are going to be out there that are going to do this, you have to at least do the same for females. Well, what this changed is between the 1960s and now, participation in sports among women went way up. And we see strength curves begin to alter in terms of just averages, even without much training. You see, because if you start sports and you have access to sports when you're young, it begins to look more and more like the curves aren't as far apart as we thought they were. What happened in the Victorian era in all European-derived societies? What did the Victorian era say about any woman who was middle class and above? No, not that bad. If they were active, they would become hysterical. Hysteria. Yeah. Along with hysterectomy, you understand the connection? There was something about being a female that meant that you were more susceptible to hysteria, and you would go crazy, you go mad. So you were literally whaleboned into 7 layers of clothing, and you were not supposed to ever get any calluses or any muscle tone. Muscle tone, that made you look ugly. Okay? So what is happening to strength curves in the Victorian era? Yeah, no kidding. And guess what happens? Now, the Victorian era is not too long after Napoleon does what to Europe? Rolls over and flattens it, basically. Now, one of the things that it rolled over and flattened was the Germanic tribes located in what we would call Germany. Now, the Germanic tribes, in their minds, they had defeated the Roman Empire. They had essentially been the most important group of people in the universe. You know about what turned out with that, right? And so during the 19th century, what did in Austria, what started in the 19th century as a way of getting back against the French and rebuilding our manlyhood? Weightlifting. In the Victorian era, that's when you have Austrian bodybuilding beginning. So some of the modern effects that we see in terms of strength differences may be due to more ancient processes. They are really real. There is real nurture difference. Real nature, we know that. But the nurture things also have tremendous effects and move the populations around. So, and I happen to know a lot about this because, again, for the past 45 years, I've dealt with this on a daily basis. So what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to do here is get you a sense of, oh, so nature, first off, is far more widely varied than we thought it was. And when I make a population statement, I'm making a population statement that is really complicated, not simple like, oh, all women can do this and all men can do that. But also, nurture has a tremendous power to alter what nature is doing anyway. So we have to be very careful when we're making these vast generalizations. Yes, go ahead.
So we could say, because of certain societal norms, a lot of graphs would be technically incorrect because some of the subjects aren't even allowed to participate in them.
Right, so it's not they'd be incorrect, but they'd look a lot different. Like, there is a nature difference in upper body strength. That goes back a couple of million years, probably. But it's nothing like what we really think it is. It's far more complicated. So yes, I would say you basically have it right. Now, by the way, I want to ask one last question. The person on the bottom left, is that nature or nurture? What?
Can't know. Isn't it that we can't know?
You can know.
Oh, you mean in the picture?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the chart. Like, that's nurture.
You guys didn't learn the lesson. It's nature and nurture. So this is frickin' nurture because you can tell by the shapes around her body they're wrong. She has taken steroids. However, can you turn me into that with steroids?
No.
No, you cannot. No amount of workout can turn me into this. So steroids are nurture, but they cannot overcome nature. I can make you much bigger on steroids, but I can't turn me into you on steroids because there's limitations. So once again, that's what I wanted to make sure you understand. This is nature. She was already strong. But you add nurture to it from steroids, and you get something even different. Okay. Okay, that was funny. All right, we're actually into chapter 1. It's a friggin' miracle. Yes, thank you very much. We made it.
Who's that guy again?
I don't know, some old guy with a beard. Could be Darwin.
That's what I was thinking, Darwin.
It might be Darwin. These days, come on, guys. These days, if someone shows you a picture of Darwin, is it really a picture of Darwin, or is it just one more Claude invention? I have no idea. Yes?
So just to backtrack a little bit, I mean, without societal norms, would it be possible for women and men to be basically like?
No, again, so it depends upon where in the curve you are. So Sydney looked kind of like a weightlifter at 7. How can you look like a freaking weightlifter at 7? It's impossible. But I met her mother, and her mother looked like an even more weightlifter's version of her daughter. So that's an extreme. So no, upper body strength in males is going to average to the higher side than females ever will. But how far are the curves really apart? Where is nature? Well, when you're born, you're a blob. So how can I tell what your nature is? So then all we can do is look at population averages of adults, and we can see that it doesn't matter whether you're in Tahiti or in Russia or in Botswana, Namibia, doesn't matter if you're in France, doesn't matter if you're in South America or North America, we do see a difference. But the differences are, they're different at different locations. So that tells us that the difference is there by nature, but that the nurture has a tremendous effect as well. Yeah. And by the way, to go along with you, so male participation in sports has basically dropped significantly since Title IX. So weirdly, my girls, when they go, like, do they still do the presidential fitness test thing? That still there?
No.
So my girls top them all out. They beat all the boys, all the football players, easily. But then that's not really fair. I have my girls in the gym, and they're doing the kind of conditioning that most people couldn't even understand. So, yeah. Yes?
So on a social level, why is that sports participation going down? Why do you think?
I think that had it been that women and men were always involved, both would be going down. But increasingly, it's a social norming thing, right? Increasingly, girls just get into soccer, lots of soccer participation, lots of sport. It's very popular to have your daughter get into sports, whereas it does not seem to be as much of a drive in American families for their boys, and I don't know why. I know it's technology, we all know that, right? But it's really beyond me. I think there's a couple of PhDs in there easily. If you were interested in that, I would do that as a PhD in a flat-out second. Okay, so Darwin. Now I want to point out that Darwin is not the last word. Much has happened since Darwin, but some of his basic thoughts are still really important. So, Darwin, born Darwin. So, why do we observe the tree of life? That's what that is. Hierarchical classifications based on similarities. Why is there a tree of life? Now, okay, so here's what we've got. We've got all these observation of species. And obviously, these are all groups of species, right? And what we notice is, here, I'll draw it out. Because really, species are leaves in a tree, okay? So think of species as leaves. And think of this tree as having a lot of leaves. Here we go. The root is in some kind of single-celled organisms. Then it branches off into all kinds of different kinds of things. I'm actually going to show you a tree of life in a moment. And you've got all these branches with all these branches off the branches, and then a little leaf. And then a branch off a branch, and a little leaf, and a little leaf, and a little leaf, and a little leaf. And then over here, you've got branches. So just imagine this incredibly huge, massive tree with lots of branches, thousands upon hundreds of thousands upon millions of leaves. Okay, so all we're saying is that if you have two leaves here, they are more closely related to each other than they are to a leaf right here, which is true in a tree, right? And they're way more closely related to each other than they are to leaves over there. Does that make sense? That's all this is saying. Now, there's no reason for life to work this way. It doesn't have to, and I'll explain why. Okay? And finally, moreover, we never see, can you imagine a whole bunch of leaves hanging in the air without a tree at all? No one ever discovers a new species and it's just sitting out in the middle of nowhere like this. This is one of the weirdest things. Every year, they discover sometimes hundreds of new species. Oh my God, the friggin' lizards. The lizards pop up everywhere.
And the beetles.
The beetles, there's another one. Apparently, everything is turning into a crab. You know this one? Thank you. Everything is turning into a crustacean. We're all apparently destined to become crabs. And if you're feeling very crabby right now, it's just getting closer, isn't it? Okay. So, despite the fact that we find new birds, new fish, new crabs, new lizards, new beetles, new worms every year, they always fit right where they should on a branch. They never sit out in the middle of nowhere, which proves that there is, you ready? This.
That's a really picked up tree.
Yep. So here's the initial root, single-celled organism, and then here's all the branches. Obviously, there's millions, but okay, this is getting close. And every time we find a new species, it's right here, boom, right on a branch. And then all the ones that are right here are way more closely related than they are to ones over here. This doesn't have to be. Indeed, what's even weirder is there are genes inside of us that are these genes. They've been copied at this point for 3 point whatever billion years. And we can see in that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, right? So as you're going through your initial growth as a fetus, right, you actually go through some of these stages. Yeah.
I like how in animals, there are a lot of animals that look like one thing but are not related to that particular.
We're actually going to do that in this class. Dolphins are the greatest example ever.
Yes.
I'm going to use that. Okay, so here we go. If I go to Barnes & Noble, and I want to find a biography of Britney Spears, because I'm fascinated. Britney, free Britney! Or please, Britney, don't fucking shave your head again. Where would I go? Would it be in current events? Would it be in biographies? Would it be in performing arts? Would it be in music? Would it be in dance? Would it be in current? I mean, like, where would it be?
In music?
Music, no one knows. That's why you have a little kiosk, they say, well, I'll go there, sir. Because most things that are in categories are not necessarily categorized like this. And then here's the weird question. Does the tree of life exist, or do we invent it?
It exists.
He's right. It exists. It's the bloodline of every organism going back to the beginning. That's what's so frigging weird. Like the question, did we invent math, or is it actually baked into the universe? Most people now believe it's baked into the universe. When you catch a ball, your brain has done a calculus equation. When you do the tree of life, it's an actual tree. The tree is the bloodline. There's a great book, another guy I do not like, but it doesn't matter whether you like him or not, Richard Dawkins. I highly recommend, don't read this book, just look it up.
Yeah, I know that.
The Ancestor's Tale. And then if you're interested, look it up. Sister's Tale.
What's his name?
Richard Dawkins, D-A-W-K-I-N-S, The Ancestor's Tale. It's a really interesting outline of this. So you can just kind of Google it, it will tell you what the book's about. Yes?
It's the same guy who made the Selfish Gene.
Selfish Gene, he's also the guy who invented memes. Another really interesting thing. Okay, so that's the first question. All right? Why did that happen? And then the next question was, why are living organisms like machines? So this is one of the really troubling ones. Because you see, this gets to be the problem of design. Organisms are clearly designed. Now, famously, the watchmaker problem. A watch is a complicated functional device. It functions, right? What is its functions? It tells you time. And it is a incredibly, not the modern watch, which is actually relatively simple, but the old geared system, which is so sophisticated, handmade at the time, that could never have come about on its own. It had to have a designer. So this is the great designer problem. How come living organisms are actually just like little machines that function and appear designed? So here's to me, the extraordinary example. As a musician all my life, I find this to be absolutely blindingly stunning. Okay, so bats, who are mammals, those are not wings, those are skin flaps. Bats who live in certain kinds of caves, and they live deep in those caves, they cannot use vision to actually identify anything important in the world because it's all dark. Now, they are themselves predators, and they eat moths, classically. There's your moth right there. Now, flying in a dark cave, first off, here, let me give you a sound field. Hear that? That's delay. That's slap back off of ceilings and floors and walls. But hear the shh. That's reverb. That's hundreds of thousands of bounces all turning into a kind of noise. Now notice, I'm a very good clapper. Notice how little sound we get back for how much signal. So the problem with sound fields and sound signals is that the information that comes back to you as a bounce is very low in volume. It's a really key element of this. Okay, so now, first off, they're flying in caves that are like friggin' caves. There's an outcropping here, there's a bend over there. They're completely irregular, and where the walls are cannot be predicted in any kind of geometric way. So how does the bat know that it's not a wall, it's a moth? So like, when I clap, some of those bounces are coming off your face. Which ones? I have no clue. What are you talking about? No one could ever know. I remember when I was younger and had much better hearing when I was before rock and roll, baby. I used to go to Balboa Park in the valley, and there's a bunch of trees, and then there's the Japanese gardens behind a brick wall. And I would go and I'd walk through the trees going, this is me, sorry. And I hear the echoes off the tree versus the slap back off the wall, which you can just barely do when you're young and have really good hearing. Okay, so now the bat, in order to figure out what's going on in the cave, has to chirp. Okay, their chirps are incredibly loud. The equivalent of going to an AC/DC concert all day long, all night long, every day for the rest of your life, because they're chirping constantly, which means that very rapidly, what would your hearing be? 0. Okay, that's weird. And in order to find a moth when they're hunting, they chirp up to 10 times per second. Remember, AC/DC concert all day long, all night long, every day for the rest of your life? Yeah, up to 10 times per second. And they are able to catch the bounce backs off the moth, and they're able to perceive it separate from the chairs and the walls and the tables and the outcroppings and everything else. Hang on, I gotta finish all this. Okay? Now, weirdly, how do they not go deaf? They've got muscles in their ears. The muscles close when they chirp and then open to get the returning signal. In coordination, up to 10 times a friggin' second. That's why they don't go deaf. But then it gets friggin' weirder. How come I can't tell the bounce off your face versus the bounce off your North Face bag? Because I don't have the right kind of audio cortex. The audio cortex of a bat doesn't hear in the way we think of hearing. It sees through hearing. The sound field of a bat is equivalent to your visual field. When it chirps, it sees everything. Wait, hears. Wait, sees. Wait, fuck me. You see? That's a machine. It's a machine of hearing. Well, okay. How did that happen? There was no designer. Here's what's even weirder. That's a bat. That's a mammal. We've got a bird, cave swiftlets, that do the same thing. That's really, they do a different kind of sounding system, but yes, they use the same system of echolocation. Here's the even weirder part. In the World War II, when they discovered sonar, when they began using sonar, anybody ever see Hunt for October? Yeah, okay, I can't do my voice then. Okay, so when you're a submarine operator, you use sound to bounce off of the bottom of the ocean and off of other submarine stuff like that. You've all seen those movies, right? Okay, the sonar operator, the ping that goes out is incredibly loud, and what comes back is teeny tiny. It's better in water than it is in air, but still tiny, tiny, tiny. There's a capacitor in the electronic signal chain of the sonar operator. When the ping goes out, it cuts off the signal. That way, the operator can leave his headphones, their headphones on all the time. That's interesting, isn't it? You have a question earlier? Comment? Good guy, yes. Well, anyway, yes, you have one? Go ahead.
No, it's like, is it similar to us when we like touch something, we notice there's two of them?
It is that complicated, yes, go ahead.
Also, it's something that I've noticed, at least with a lot of animals, including people, when you lose a particular sense, then all your energy goes to your other senses to compensate.
Yes, you know who talked the most about this? So I think it was Ray Charles who lost his sight as a young person. And he was one of the people talking a lot about how that happened. So it's really fascinating what you're talking about. Yes?
So you said that bats can see a visual field with their sonar.
Yes.
Is that
Their aural field is like our visual field. So when they chirp, they actually they hear this.
but they don't literally see like a black and white gradient of
No.
stuff.
No.
Okay.
So if you were to close your eyes and imagine what it would be like to hear like you see, you can almost imagine like for me, it's like an aural.
Yeah, I get it.
That,
It's
yeah,
not
you got it.
complicated than what we're-
It's very weird. I have no, like, we can't describe it. So, yeah, but you're right to call me on it. Thank you. Okay, so Darwin said, actually, I can solve both problems. We're seeing very weird things. He said, all I have to know is what happened right here. So at some point around 7 to 10 million years ago, the ancestor of all modern chimpanzees and all modern humans split. And somehow, when they split, they began to evolve differently. And he said, what did this is the environment is the designer. You see, that's why I picked the caves. The cave is the environment, and the cave swiftlets, the bird, and the bat, both face the same problem. That is, what if you have no point to being able to see? What if seeing doesn't help you? This goes back to your very wonderful point. In that case, then you better focus on your other senses. All right, let me ask you a question. Is hearing acuity heritable? Yes. I am one of those lucky people who before rock and roll, I had really extraordinary hearing. I'd have lived longer in a cave than most people. I would have passed on my DNA more often, and my father was a famous folk musician, and back in my ancestral past, all of my ancestors have been really good musicians. Why? Because they had superior hearing. They heard more like that. I could literally go to that park when I was young, and I could hear a little bit of the bounce back off the trees. In fact, going back to your marvelous comment, the thing is nowadays, one of the things they're starting to teach blind people is echolocation.
To become Batman.
Right, that was a good. So here's the thing. Yes, you could have this happen. Just a little bit better hearing, those pass on their DNA. Some of their offspring have just a little bit better hearing, and they pass on theirs. And then eventually you've got a designed organism that can hear like we see. Yes?
Does that also include like artistic ability?
I don't know. I haven't studied that.
Creativity, or like, say with music.
Okay, creativity. Yes, some people argue that is heritable. I don't know. Musical ability is. We know some about that, but I don't know about some of the others. I've never researched it myself. You should research that. That's an interesting question. Yes.
That's probably the explanation for convergent evolution.
That's what it is. So we're going to get to that. You're ahead of me again. Love it.
They have demos.
Okay, so here we go. This is what the whole thing looks like. This is 11 points on your first exam, so you might want to make sure you've got this somewhere. So Darwin said, this is all you need to know. He said this is environment designing organisms. It's called natural selection. So the definition of natural selection is too many offspring. Okay, so we go and live in caves. There's a whole bunch of us. Some of them have better hearing. And there's not enough food for everyone. So the ones with better hearing survive a little bit longer, pass on their DNA. Okay? So, too many offspring. There's variation that affects survival and reproduction. Now, once again, I try to make my stories go forward and backward. So remember, yesterday I said that DNA builds bodies in order to reproduce. And I emphasize that because it doesn't build bodies to survive. Death is designed into selection. There will be no great lengthening of human life without significant genetic modification. It's impossible. There are two forces that drive death into the system. It's called antagonistic pleiotropy and mutation accumulation. So that's one of the reasons why all this longevity science is mostly hoo-ha, because it can't be. Selection designs death in order to get more reproduction. That's what's so trippy. So again, it's not survival. All you got to do is survive long enough to reproduce. To keep this in your head, think about do you feel sorry for him or not? The praying mantis male. The praying mantis male that never gets laid has a good life. The praying mantis male who gets laid the first time is dead. So, I don't know.
But that's my point, right?
That's the point. I want you to know it's reproduction. Yes, go ahead.
My favorite example of that is giant moths. Once they go into the office, they lose the ability to eat, which is why as caterpillars they eat so much, because the only thing that they're meant to do is reproduce to make more moths.
Send me a link on that. That's
The
awesome.
moth, the atlas moth, the comet moth, all have that in common.
See? That's how freaky it is. Send me a link to that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yes, we are.
To die as efficiently as possible.
No. But your first part of your point is very true. We are literally designed to reproduce and die. It's really grotesque. Yeah, it's part of the system. Now, we could possibly extend life a lot without genetic modification, maybe up to 110, 120. But beyond 110, 120, it gets to be, you have to do genetic modification. Yeah, go ahead.
My grandma's grandparents, they lived right that long.
Every once in a while you get that.
105.
I have a friend right now whose mother is 104 and she still argues politics every day. And I'm like, give it up, jeez. And then finally, the third is that traits must be inheritable. So I keep talking about heritability because traits that aren't inherited don't mean anything. So height, personality type, IQ, maybe some kind of political orientations in some kind of vague way, body shape, height, weight patterns, eye color, all these things have some level of inheritance. So that's what natural selection is. Natural selection is, as a definition, it looks very complicated, non-random differential, but it's actually really silly and simple. Some reproduce and some don't. Different reproduction, and it's not random. It's predictable. One of the great things about studies in natural selection, and this goes back to Darwin, repeat this, if you know the environment and the creature, I can tell you what's going to happen. Natural selection studies are really easy to do. You give me the environment, you give me the creature, I'll tell you what's going to happen. In fact, you'll do it with me. Okay, so massive nuclear war between China and the US and Russia and Europe and Botswana and a block of cheese happens, and the entire Earth is irradiated for thousands of years. And there's only a few 100,000 people left living in the vast, howling nuclear environment. You got the picture? So the remaining humans go to live in caves. Okay. Now, because of the nature of radiation, it penetrates the ground a little bit, and it's very virulent. You have to live deep in caves, because it also goes through the air into the early parts of the cave. And we're going to be stuck there for thousands of years, because, we fucked up the Earth. After tens of thousands of years of living in caves, humans on average will be A, taller, B, the same height, C, shorter. What's the answer? Hey. So, okay, let's go through all the things your brain just automatically did. Okay, so taller people, they're stuck closer to the surface, and as they go deeper in caves, they get more stuck, they die, they get more infected cuts, no antibacterials, they die. They can't get deeper in caves to where the food is, they die. Shorter people can do all these things better. They get deeper in the caves, less radiation, less infected cuts, less getting stuck in the caves and bottlenecks and dying, more resources, reproduce more. Yeah. So what did I do? I gave you a creature and an environment, you gave me the answer easily. There you go. So the thing about this is it's a really simple thing. The environment sculpts organism. It was the same thing as the cave. So yeah.
Like in Chernobyl, wildlife goes back.
Chernobyl is a perfect example of natural-ish selection. So nobody wanted those weird ass dogs, wolves, and other kinds of things floating around there. Yes.
What happens to the dogs and wolves and stuff floating around?
They've all become different.
How?
Read it. You read it. So evolution is one of the outcomes. That is descent with change. And my story of the cave is descent with change. So if we were to go live in caves for thousands of years, we would become shorter. Now there's a real world example. If you go to live on an island, so let's say there's a mainland and there's a little island off the mainland, and we end up living on the island, and we are this kind of size species. Over time, will we, 1, become bigger, 2, stay the same size, or 3, get smaller?
Smaller.
1 and 3.
Son of a bitch. Smaller. Smaller predators, fewer predators, less resources on the island. Islands are boom and bust systems. You have less stability. You get smaller. So fascinating. That's a real world example. Dwarf elephants are one of the classics. Yes?
How short?
So that also ties into, you know, competition as well, because you want to out-compete competitors.
That's why you get smaller, because you're getting fewer resources, but you have less predation. Correct. You save energy. Yeah?
What is island gigantism?
That's so friggin' weird. So by the way, humans have done both. So, and this gets beyond this class, but I love these questions. Okay, so here's the weird thing. Homo floresiensis was a dwarfism example. Dwarfism is not good or bad. So it literally is gigantism and dwarfism. It's not meant like bad in any way. So I'll use a different term. Is a smaller creature. But the Tonganese, the members of the Hawaiian population, many Pacific Island peoples are bigger. Weirdly, it's the same process. So in the dwarfing, what you do is you compete, you get smaller things, less big predators, less lions, so you get smaller to conserve resources. But you can also get bigger because you can take on more weight and survive bust cycles. Because smaller creatures run hotter. Bigger creatures run cooler, metabolism-wise. So although you need a larger number of calories every day, you don't need as high quality calories, and you can store more fat and survive bad years. That's one of the arguments for giganticism. Now, you look it up, because that was the end of my competence, right there. That's all I got. Yeah, go ahead, quick.
So is it like, you know how the megalodon got hunted out by smaller sharks? Because smaller sharks.
Like I said, you just went way beyond my competence right there. That was the end of my competence on that one. So next, so you can either get descent with change, you guys all got great examples of that, or you can stay the same. Now, natural selection actually is working all the time. And most of the time, what time is it? Okay, I'm okay. Wait, am I okay? Yes, I'm okay. 11:50. Yeah, okay. So most of the time, I never know what's going on. So remember yesterday, I do apologize again. Just let me know if I run over again. So most of the time, natural selection is actually keeping you exactly as you are. You're not changing. And the classic is human birth weight. So this, I think, is a fascinating thing because C-sections are changing everything. Now, okay, so here's what we know about giving birth. Well, obviously, having me stand up here and talk about giving birth is a joke, but I have to do my best because I'm the professor. So, if you are born really friggin' massive, you are far healthier. In fact, the lifetime consequences of being a bigger baby in equal environments are better than being a small baby. So there is a trend towards being a bigger baby. So many, I'm not talking about how big you get when you're adult. I'm just talking about how big you are when you're born. On the other hand, Carol Burnett famously said that giving birth is like taking your lower lip between your thumb and forefinger and pulling it over the back of your head. And that was when I decided I was never going to give birth. And then when I was in like 10th grade, they showed that video. I think they probably erased that video from history. literally like a vaginal view birth, and like that was like traumatizing to everybody. And then I've gotten reports from people who were in labor for like 2 days, in friggin' labor for 2 days, like in pain. So if you're a much smaller baby, you have a lot less trauma in birth and a lot less complications in birth. But you've got a more compromised immune system, a more problematic situation. Okay, so what this has meant is that for most of human history, you can't be born less than about 3 pounds. Otherwise, you go into a NICU. And NICUs are a brand new thing.
What's that?
A natal intensive care unit. So it's intensive care for newborns. Because they're so small, they're likely to die of all kinds of a number of conditions, including any bacteria that floats along, they're dead. They have no immune systems. So, but if you're a 15-pound baby, what's not going to happen? Well, let's put it this way. You can't have buyer's remorse when you're pregnant, can you? Buyer's remorse is not really a thing. 8 months, you're like, fuck it, I'm taking it back to the store. George, fuck you, it's over. So, if you don't come out, how do you do as an adult if you don't come out? That doesn't work. So, you can say that you've got all these selection forces. On the side of being too large, death for everyone involved, right? And that happened a lot. Death in childbirth was a common thing for human history all the way till the early to mid 20th century, across the globe and in every developed country, right? But if you're too small, you die because your lungs weren't functioning, your organs weren't functioning, your brain wasn't functioning, your immune system wasn't functioning. So that's been running stabilizing selection for probably hundreds to thousands of years, right? That's a perfect example. Okay. Comment, question? Yeah.
Yeah. You said that video had been erased as traumatized viewers, right? But there's also like a trauma to getting born.
I know.
It makes sense that the video would traumatize you.
I remember my birth trauma myself. Or maybe it was just like, fuck, I am never gonna have that happen to me. I don't understand. Like, there's gotta be some kind of like special magic that makes you able to go through that. Like, has anybody given birth? What, you just like live through it? Like, what the fuck? I think you just live through it, don't you?
I haven't given birth, but I found out that my great grandma gave birth to 12 children.
Yeah.
And I found out how that messed with her because she ended up getting cervical cancer because that can give you cancer. Too many kids can give you cancer.
Okay, let's go on to this again. It's getting worse. Okay. So do remember that one of the things that people tend to always say, you guys, that's awesome, I love it. So one of the things people tend to say, not you guys, is that, well, evolution is good for the species. No. Evolution doesn't give a rat's ass about species. Evolution only cares about individuals. In fact, it's so powerful on individuals that it's not even about really species at all. In fact, you could argue, hang on, let me get through this. The species don't exist. What exists is holders of niches and gene pools. So, a lion holds a niche called apex predator, right, on the African savanna. Every lion is competing against every other individual holder of that niche. Wild dogs, hyenas, leopards, they overlap a little bit in some of the choices. And as long as a sufficient number of lions individually pass on the genes for lions, there will be a gene pool called lions. But it's literally up to the individuals. This is why when you get population collapse, you get endangered species. Why are species endangered? Why do they tend to collapse? Because at some point you have not enough individuals to even hold the gene pool together. Yeah, comment, question?
Yeah, I was saying that's how you get evolutionary traits that look like it would be detrimental, not even benefit. Like there's a particular pig that has tusks that grow into its skull, type of thing.
Yeah.
But that's because big tuskers reproduce more. So
There you go. Exactly right. So it is always about the individual. It's never about the group, except when it comes to altruism. Altruism confuses everybody. We'll do it in chapter 7. Okay, we did this whole comment yesterday about the fact that your genes are what. Okay, all right. So what time I got here? Perfect. Here we go, onward 2.
Part 2.
Oh no, we're not done yet. We're here still. Okay, so the first video I'm going to show you is actually going to be used for the midterm. Okay, there it is. It's actually a nice demonstration of natural selection. I'll put the link up this week sometime. I'll put the link up for it so you have it available to you. It's what are called Darwin's finches. It's a really extraordinary study. So one of the things, it's very difficult to actually do a natural selection study and see evolution. Why? Because evolution occurs over many lifetimes. And if I was to do a natural selection experiment on, say, people who live like birds or wild animals that live like 20, 30 years, I wouldn't see evolution for thousands of years. That's just the nature. It's a slow-moving system. Well, we've got this one study, which is really extraordinary, where they actually saw evolution happen in a few years. And so here we go. Again, this will become data that you use. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because it's boring.
300,000 beetles alone. 17,000.
Friggin' beetles.
Thousands of animals, fish, and birds, all astonishingly different.
There we go. It is showing that. Is it called
How
Kathy?
did so many species come to be? To seek insights into that question, researchers are focusing on places where species recently arose, such as the remote Galapagos Islands.
Scientists are making observations and conducting experiments that would have surprised Charles Darwin. And they're discovering new insights into what the great naturalist called the mystery of mysteries. How new species form.
Okay, come on, hurry up.
The Galapagos Islands are one of the most spectacular landscapes in the world, home to a variety of species that live nowhere else. Biologists Peter and Rosemary Grant have been seeking answers to how species arise by focusing on one of the smaller islands, called Daphne Major.
When we started out, we had no plan for the long term. In fact, we thought it was just going to be just a few years, maybe 2 years.
2 years have turned into a 40-year odyssey. The Grants have returned every summer since 1973. Here, they've made some of the most remarkable observations in the history of field research as they studied the famed Galapagos finches. The finches were first brought to scientists' attention by Charles Darwin, when his voyage around South America brought him to this cluster of islands, 600 miles from mainland Ecuador. These volcanic islands are geologically young. They began rising from the ocean floor less than 5 million years ago. At first devoid of life, they now support a modest number of species. Among them, 13 species of finches, found in various combinations on the different islands. The birds live in diverse habitats.
The islands are very different from each other. They differ in size, they differ in topography, and in height.
Larger trees grow at higher elevations, while low islands have mostly cactus, grasses, and shrubs. In these diverse habitats, the finches have evolved many ways to survive.
So, Rosemary, what's the important difference between these birds?
This little walker finch with its very fine needle-like beak is perfect for picking off insects. This one is the woodpecker finch with a rather more robust beak. concentrates on beetle larvae and termite larvae. Then we have the cactus finch with a much longer, sharp, pointed beak, which probes into cactus flowers. And then these three species.
Okay, so notice, she separates them, but then she puts them together. This is part of one of the questions in the midterm. So she's going to say these three species. She actually holds them up together, whereas she's differentiating them by not holding them up with the cactus finch. So this is a really interesting point right here, because there's a lot of debate about whether the large, medium, and small beak groundfinch are one species or three.
The large, medium,
So hold them up
and
together.
small groundfinches. So, Sean, the basic idea is the beaks are tools, and you need the right tool for the right job.
Wait,
The finches look so different.
so like,
I'm only pointing out that if you noticed, she said this species, held it up, this species, and then she held up three together. That's very odd. Well, actually, it's going to be a question in the midterm. So I'm foreshadowing. I'm giving you a forenotice that this is going to be important. Yes.
So she said woodpecker, cactus, and what's the
Well, who knows? But these three are the ones that matter. So.
That Darwin first mistook them for entirely unrelated kinds of birds. How did the Galapagos end up with so many species of finches?
In terms of the actual history of the finches of the
Here we go.
Galapagos, there were many different possibilities. Different kinds of finches could have all come from the mainland separately, or the finches could have all evolved out there on the islands. And what do we know about that?
Well, now we know from DNA evidence that all of the finches are more related to each other than any one is to a species on the mainland. And that tells us only one species arrived on the archipelago.
Okay, so what we have here is part of what's called the biological species concept. This is going to be important throughout the course. The biological species concept says the following. If you can have offspring that can have offspring, you are members of the same species. The biological species concept says that if you can have offspring that can have offspring, then you are members of one species. So the classic example, or the one that proves this, are lions and tigers mating together and producing ligers. Those are a real thing. It's not an urban myth. But the thing is, ligers are sterile. Excuse me, are mules. They're sterile. Also, if you do horses and donkeys together, you get the mule. Mules are a combination, but they're sterile. So you can have offspring, and the offspring are perfectly functional, but they can't have offspring. So again, in the biological species concept, if you can have offspring and your offspring have offspring, you are members of the same species. Okay, and then always once you have a concept, you have a method by which you get new species. So the question is, how do you get new species? Well, in the biological species concept, it's through allopatric speciation. So here's what we know.
how do you spell it?
A-L-L-O-P-A-T-R-I-C. R-I-C. And then speciation. S-P-E-C-I-A-T-I-O-N. All right. So what we know is we've got finches on the mainland. Yes?
What about Sympacus?
We're not there yet. Good for you. I love being ahead. Okay, but this is for the midterm, right? So I'm doing information for the midterm, and I'm ignoring sympathetic speciation until we get to chapter 4. So we've got a bunch of mainland finches on Ecuador, on Ecuador, whatever. Okay? We have a 600-mile physical barrier. Specifically, that is a perfect physical barrier to gene flow because no bird can fly 600 miles, ever. Not gonna happen, not this kind of bird. I don't know about some gigantic bird that could do it, but this bird can't. So you ask the question, well, how do they get out there anyway? Probably floating vegetation. So you get birds, the vegetation floats on the surface, there's lots of food in the vegetation. You get a certain kind of pattern of ocean movement and weather patterns, and it's gonna push them out and they're gonna get stuck on that vegetation, but it's okay because the vegetation's got a lot of food. And they end up out here, but it doesn't go backwards. And it's a very rare event. So this is a physical barrier to gene flow. These birds can't fly over here and mate with these birds can't fly and mate with these birds, okay? So what we have is, we have a population here and a population here. They're separated by a physical barrier to gene flow, a geographic barrier. And on each side, you've got different environments. So you've got environ X and you've got environ Y. Because they live in different environments, the birds that end up here adapt to these islands, which is different than what the birds here experience, okay? So allopatric speciation says that if you have a physical barrier to gene flow and different environments on each side of the barrier, and the barrier lasts long enough, you're going to get new species. Okay. And here you see it right here, the major speciation event. Okay? And so I just drew it out for you. This is Ecuador right here on the mainland, and this is the Galapagos Islands. Okay, that's one thing.
And diversified into the 13 species that we see nowadays in the Galapagos. So they've all come from a single common ancestor.
The question then becomes, how did one ancestral population give rise to many different species?
It's the environment,
to a
always.
different lifestyle. A crucial insight into how adaptation occurs came when the grants focused on one species on the island of Daphne Major.
A factor of great convenience for us was the small size of the island. That meant that we could walk all over the place.
Oh, there's a bird.
I'll leave that one to you.
The idea was that if we worked really hard, we could follow every individual or almost every individual.
They rose at 5:30 each morning to net the island's median ground finches. They measured the size and shape of each bird's beak, the bird's weight, and they tagged them for identification.
The male is a 17-4-8.
Year after year they returned, at times tracking over 1,000 finches.
So here's an example of a bird we know intimately over the whole of its lifespan. The number is 5960. We know how many times it bred, which years it bred in, how many mates it had, how many offspring it produced, and then how many of those offspring themselves survived long enough to breed.
Over the first 4 years, little seemed to change. Then in 1977, a terrible drought began.
Virtually no rain fell for the next 18 months.
The vegetation practically disappeared, apart from a few trees without any leaves, and of course the cactus bushes were still there.
Now the median ground finches had to compete for scarce food.
They started off with a big food supply of small seeds.
Let me move this. Okay.
Medium seeds.
To compete for scarce food.
They started off with a big food supply.
Okay, so you can see right here, we're going to see again, they've got two different sizes of seeds here. This is going to become part of the 3 finches question. So,
Small seeds, medium seeds, large seeds.
Different
As these
species of
small
seeds.
seeds became very scarce. They had to turn increasingly to the large and hard.
Okay, what you notice is these are entirely different species of seeds. And that means that there's no smooth distribution of size. And actually, he even mentioned it. There's the small seeds, which are very soft. It's like little Rice Krispies. They're like tiny little soft things. These are like walnuts. And there's another one in between called medium seeds, different species. And they're all very different. And can you imagine the 3 different beak sizes? all focusing on seeds, but all focused on one particular size of seed. Can you see it? Okay. That's why, are the three finches different species, or are they one species? Well, they're all focused on seed size, and here's the other weird part. They can all mate together and produce viable offspring. Viable means not only do you live, but you could reproduce yourself. Yet they still look like different species. I'll get to that later on. I just want you to have that in your mind. Yes?
So is that what the allopatric speciation?
So this is allopatric speciation. This requires an actual barrier to gene flow. Okay? You have to have, they literally cannot be there. These three species exist in the same environment. Yes?
I was wondering, you said that allopatric speciation, if you have a physical barrier and it stays long enough, you get a new species.
Yeah.
But in the video, it said that the three different species are still like the same species that they were. So are they still the same?
That's your earlier question, remember? What happens when it happens in the same environment? So let me go back. This way. There it is. So the real evolutionary event, this is the big one, is this one. What happens on the island, there they are. Who said that? That was funny. There they are, see them? They're up there. So it's all on the same island. We'll get to them later. Let me finish. Let me finish up with, that was very funny. Let me finish up with what the rest of this. Okay, so yeah, he's got his birthday. He loves their friggin' birthday. Are you beginning to understand how weird data is? Like, okay, that's data. 40 years of recording every frickin' thing those little birds do. Is this stalking?
Yes.
Should we jail these people for literal bird stalking like mad? I just insane. Wow, this is insane.
Over the first 4
Okay,
years,
here we go.
little seemed to change. Then in 1977, a terrible drought occurred.
Virtually no rain fell for the
There,
seeds, large seeds. As these small seeds became very scarce, they had to turn increasingly to the large and hard seeds. But only birds with large beaks can crack open these woody, spiny fruits.
The birds with the smallest beaks had the most trouble.
They were scraping about amongst the rocks, and their plumage got so warm that they could barely fly.
That year, over 80% of the median ground finches died.
So remember, yesterday I actually told this story. It was about the wild species problem. Most wild species are a couple of meals from starving to death. This is one of the proofs I gave. They would literally, see what he's doing? He's holding up handfuls of dead birds. They would simply get up at 5:30 in the morning and find bunches of dead birds laying around who had simply fallen asleep and never woken up. That's the reality. What is it? Nature is red in tooth and claw. There you go. That's the reality. Look at
We would go around looking for birds that had died, and it's very sad to pick up a bird and say,
they had no predators. It was all just starvation.
No, not that bird. Oh.
When they inventoried the surviving median ground finches, they discovered that one trait had made the greatest difference.
You already know. Since they only had large walnut hard seeds left, which size beaks were the ones that survived? Large. See? Like I said, this is really important. Natural selection is actually easy to study. It may take a lot of friggin' time, and you may have to be semi-insane to do it, but it's a very predictable science. Go ahead.
We're actually looking at it also with elephants right now.
Yep.
Those that are now being born with elephants because of culture.
Correct. This is another interesting selection. This is another one of those. Is it artificial? Is it natural? But yes, you're exactly right. It ends up being a kind of natural selection event. Good for
Life
you.
and death.
But I'm showing here a distribution
Okay.
of beak depths of
You'll
the
see.
population
You're dead right.
in 1976. The survivors of this group are shown in black.
Okay, so you can see. None of the tiny ones survive.
The larger the beak, the higher the likelihood of surviving through the drought of 1977.
Then, is it heritable?
18.6 grams.
When they looked at the offspring,
There.
they found an even greater surprise. The average beak depth was more than 4% larger than the previous generation.
So you have to understand, before this study, nobody had ever seen it in a macro species. They'd never seen an evolutionary event because it usually takes so long. Go.
So was this the event that created the different medium, small, medium, large?
No, that's a different one.
Okay,
But this
so-
sets up an, oh, you are so good. This sets up an evolutionary trend. Can I wait for a second?
Oh, okay, I need to wait too.
Okay, yeah. So let me wait for a second. Well, let's wait on that question, and we're going to talk about something that happened with this.
Natural selection had changed the average beak size.
Notice the music. Oh, yes, we've discovered it. I don't know.
Imagine.
I don't know. There's a problem here.
Observing something like this on such a short time scale until you actually did it.
When we started, the answer is no. We could not imagine we would be able to do it.
Well, there's a problem.
But was this a fluke? Or are changes like this happening all the time?
Okay, so now, Sean Carroll's a genius. Brilliant guy. Really brilliant. But there's a little bit of a problem here. He said something really important. Is this constantly happening? Yes, we are currently evolving right now. How much is it moving in a particular direction? That's a really interesting question. Here we go.
5 years later, in 1983, an unusually strong El Nino brought 10 times more rain than normal. And the island was overrun by vines that covered even the cactus. The rains changed the vegetation on the island, such that 2 years later, when drought struck, larger seeds became scarce.
Okay, now what happens? Beaks get...
The birds with larger beaks now had difficulty picking up the more abundant food, the small seeds produced by the vines. That year, many more finches with small beaks survived, and their offspring inherited smaller beaks.
Look at the little bitty birds.
So selection had swung in the opposite direction, and evolution had occurred as a result.
Okay, this is where it gets weird. Okay, this became under attack massively because this is not evolution, it's a wobble. So, now in biology, this is where it gets weird. You have any biology majors? All right, okay. So you might know about this. Okay, so in biology, these two terms both exist and do not exist. Macro and microevolution. Okay, macro and microevolution are not real because all evolution starts at micro and gradually builds to macro. But biologists do recognize that there are trends and non-trends. This is a non-trend. Nothing happened. The beaks ended up the same damn size. So this became attacked. Hang on, I have to finish this part. This became massively attacked by anti-evolutionists as BS. You called it evolution, but nothing really changed. But the really important part is actually what he says right here.
Well, now we know from DNA evidence that all of the finches are more related to each other than any one is to a species on the mainland. And that tells us only one species arrived on the archipelago and diversified.
There's the actual evolutionary event. That's why your question was ahead. It was good. That wasn't, the whole wobble thing doesn't end up feeling like an evolutionary event because you evolve bigger than you evolve small and end up the same. And so you can't really say, oh, we see, I know, the biologists will come and kill me afterwards, a macro evolutionary event. We did not evolve, no, well, yes, we did. It happened there. It happened from Ecuador to the islands. How do we know? Because you can now do what's called genetic distance data, where you can actually determine just exactly how genetically related any given species are. And it turns out that they have absolute proof that the Ecuadorian finches are, in fact, the progenitors, the origin of all of these species. And then you can do genetic distance data on all of these species and see they're all more closely related to each other. So they all evolved out here versus what was on the mainland. That's the real evolutionary event. It really happened. It's not, you can't explain it by saying, oh, it's just microevolution. And that's where it finally works. Yeah.
So, most people might consider this a macro evolution event.
And that tells us only one species arrived.
Sorry, I lost your last bit. They might consider
They might consider this a macro evolution kind of thing if they're inclined to believe in that theory?
I'm saying a little bit different. I can't spell evolution really. I'm saying a little bit different. I'm saying that in biology, they don't like the macro-micro evolution debate because essentially all evolution is evolution. But they recognize that some evolutionary trends end up in major change, and you might call that macroevolution. Whereas the wobble you saw was more microevolution. And so if I was a biologist doing this, I would basically just point to the genetic distance data of the Ecuadorian finches and say, I don't care what you call what the birds did with the seed sizes. Whatever happened between Ecuador and the islands was macroevolution. This is a major change in species. In fact, the Galapagos Islands are a macroevolutionary event. The species found on the Galapagos are unlike anything found anywhere else, and they're all genetically related to species from the mainland. So that's why I think the debate would end up being, I hope. Yes?
So are they the same species or not?
They're not at all. Oh, the ones that wobbled?
There's small, medium, large.
Oh, we're going to get to that. Don't worry. I won't leave you out. Just keep it in your mind. Okay, back to my PowerPoint slides. Okay, so let me just go through. How am I doing? Time. I have time. I do swear. I try to keep track of time. Okay, so we have a drought, right? And what we have is we have absolutely a struggle for survival. To give you the numbers, it was 1,200 birds down to 180. That is death. Wow. And that is selection pressure. If you are that close to everyone dying, that's a lot of pressure. At the same time, seed size went up radically. Okay?
Did they build their population back up or?
Yeah, over time they did. So what's the prediction? Well, your probability of survival based upon seed size, and in fact it turned out that way, is a larger beak gives you better chance of survival. Next, did the offspring actually get larger? Well, here's what they found. Larger beak parents do have larger beak offspring, first off, and the second data point is that offspring beak depth went up radically. So in fact, struggle for survival and reproduction, variation that affects some members, and then pass it on. All right, now, we are getting a lot done. We're doing good. You have lots of great questions, and you're slowing me down, which you should definitely trying to do. And at the same time, we're getting a lot done. Okay, so this set up the next debate. So the next debate was, okay, great. I can get longer legs or shorter legs. That's all beaks are. Beak depth and beak size are like to us legs, right? The beaks are important for their survival and reproduction. 2 million years ago, we got vastly longer legs than Homo erectus so we could run around the African savanna and not be eaten. Okay, so that's no big deal. Almost no one argues against a little bit longer legs or shorter legs. What about really complex traits? Comment, question?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I searched up something on Monday, like after your class, and it was because you said something about bipeds, and I looked at the metacarpal, and when we were like this, when we were on all four of our limbs, the bones in here and the bones here were about similar.
We'll get into that, yeah.
Yeah, when we started walking as bipeds, there's a lot more bones in here now.
We'll get into that later on when we do anatomy of bipedality. Good for you, that's awesome. Yeah, metatarsals and metacarpals are very different. Okay, so the thing about it is that everyone accepted the change in legs, but nobody bought the eye. So, bought the eye? Well, so I evolved longer legs. So a little bit longer legs makes me a little faster. Actually, it's weird if you're a sprinter, you tend to be, yes. So it's not quite right. Let's put it this way. If a little bit longer legs, you tend to be a much better runner in a sense. It's very complicated. So, but how does getting a little bit of an eye help? And here's the basic question. You've got this beautiful thing in your head called an eye, right? One of the most extraordinary mechanisms ever. I take I take all of your eye, I'm gonna rip that sucker out. And then I cut 5% out with a scalpel and hand it back to you. Is that any good to you?
No.
There's the question. So a
So
5% longer leg, that makes me a little better runner. I know, it's a physiology question, very complex. But does 5% of an eye make you a little more sighted? No. But it does. So it turns out that for Darwin, the eye was a big problem. It was brought up right away after he published. Altruism, the eye, and a couple others were brought up, and he never could understand the eye because the eye seems like such a complete mechanism. It turns out, actually, we have mollusks. Yes. And the height of the mollusk lineage are octopuses. And octopuses have a human eye that is better designed than ours and comes from a completely different lineage. It's extraordinary. And here's how it works. It takes about 1 million years, and what you start with is you start with a dot. This is your day. When I learned this, I was like, okay, I get it now. Finally, I get it. So basically, you just start with light-sensitive tissue. Now, light-sensitive tissue doesn't give you anything. So you know when you're at the beach and you're under the umbrella because you're like me and you don't want to like bake yourself into skin cancer, and one of your arms is hanging out in the sun? Do you know it's hanging out in the sun? Now, you recognize it. But why? Well, because your skin tells you the sun is beating on it. Well, that's close enough. Imagine all you've got is a little bit of light-sensitive tissue. It just tells you, light, idiot. Now, we actually have, and this is great because remember yesterday I talked about if you're a bacteria, what do you need to copy yourself? Lots of energy. Okay, what if you are a photosynthetic bacteria? Here's photosynthetic bacteria A, and here's photosynthetic bacteria B. A has a little light-sensitive spot, so it knows where the sun is. B doesn't. They both live off of photosynthesis. They convert sun's light into energy and thus make copies of themselves. If A can find light, but B has to find it randomly, who passes more of their DNA on? That is a single point mutation. It's one mutation in one codon on one gene. Simple as that. Next, let's say you're a reef dweller. Reefs are one of the most extraordinary civilization systems in the universe, and you're living on the reef, and you're a little creature that does frondy. You know what frondy is? No. It puts out little things out into the water to collect little bits of sort of small food bits floating around. And then all of a sudden, coming over here is darkness. What do?
Go back.
You pull your frondies back, because any kind of darkness means either a boat, which in case you're safe, or it means a predator that's probably going to eat your frondy, so you shrink back in. Okay? Now, having a sense of where that's coming from is valuable, but let's say even more importantly, you're something more mobile. Let's say you have the opportunity to move. Now, you rely upon food sources, and part of your reliance upon food sources is being able to be closer to where sunlight is, because your food sources also rely upon sunlight. You need to know now where sunlight is coming from and where darkness is coming from. You see? And you can move either to avoid predation, or you can move towards better resource distribution. Does that make sense? Then a light-sensitive tissue in a depression gives you a sense of direction, right? Okay, so I've just given you a few more % of an eye, and it's helped you out. Now here's one of the weirdest things in optics. This is my favorite friggin' thing. And when I was a kid, long before there was anything to do but play with silly putty, we actually did this. And so I can actually speak to this. It's pretty cool. If you have light-sensitive tissue at the bottom of a pocket that's almost closed to the top, you get something really weird. It's called a pinhole camera. Weirdly, light autofocuses as it squeezes through this, and you get an image. You're looking at me like, you're friggin' kidding me.
See that again?
It's called a pinhole camera. Now, I learned this when I was a kid. Like I said, we had Silly Buddy. So what was really exciting was when in the back of a comic, I read a lot of comics, no video games those days, there was a pinhole camera. And they said, send off for the pinhole camera. All you need is an oatmeal box. You know the cylindrical oatmeal boxes, right? All you need is a Quaker oatmeal box, and we'll send you a pinhole camera. And what they send is they send a little coin about this big with a little tiny hole in it. So a little metal coin with a hole in it. And then they send you some photo paper in a light dark envelope. And they give you instructions. Take your Quaker oatmeal box, cut a hole almost the size of the coin, tape the coin to the oatmeal box lid, careful not to cover the hole, then go into the closet, cover the bottom with a towel, make sure no lead's coming in, open the light dark envelope, pull out the scissors of paper, put it at the back of the oatmeal box, close the oatmeal box, cover your finger over the hole of the metal disc, go out in your, I did in the backyard, put it down, open it, leave it not moving for 30 seconds. Cover the hole back up, go open, you get the whole idea. Send off the paper to us, we'll send you back your photo. And all it was a coin with a hole in it. I got back a picture of my backyard. Friggin' amazing. That's called a pinhole camera. Once you've got a pinhole camera, which is what? 10% of an eye, maybe? No lenses, no nothing. It's just a hole and some light sensitive tissue. You've got a problem. Anyone ever had zits? Yeah. I love how true or brave how to raise it. Yeah, all of us, right? So the thing is, this is a very delicate, problematic system. Any pocket in flesh is a mess. The bacteria, yeah, exactly. So you need a transparent cover. Frequently, once again, it is a single mutation. Simple. Then you've got the beginning of an eye. Now here's where it gets weirder. If you've had zits, you know that this just fills up with fluid. Guess what filling up with mostly clear fluid gets you? A lens. Fluid is a lens. You know when you poke your finger into water and you don't touch the thing you thought you were going to touch? That's a lensing effect. It's a refraction. So this is called a passive lens. It can't, in your eye, you know the way you focus is you have muscles that pull the lens flatter and relax. Do you know that? So there's no muscles yet, but you've got a passive lens. And then all you need is some muscles, just little bits. They just pull a little tiny bit and flat, and you get more focus. And then pretty soon you have a friggin' eye. It's insane. I love this.
What was the evolution to an octopus's eye that made this better than ours?
I'll explain it. So, limpets have essentially light-sensitive tissue, photosynthetic bacteria too. The California abalone has really great direction finding, but no pinhole camera yet. Okay? Sorry, that was the bear shell. The California abalone actually has a pinhole camera. What I meant is that the turban shell actually has a covered pinhole camera. Okay? One protected from any kind of bacterial input. The spiny Dimurex has a passive lens. It doesn't focus, but it does make it more clear than it otherwise would be. The Atlantic dogwelk has an active lens and a pretty good eye. The octopus has our eye, but better. Our eye is wired backward. That's how screwed up the vertebrate eye is. When I realized that we have the shit eye and octopuses have the good eye, I suddenly understood evolution. Because evolution climbs fitness mountains. So a fitness mountain is the more of something you get, the more fit you are. Okay. Here you are, you're in flatland, and you are busy trying to build an eye. And you happen to be a vertebrate. And so you build the vertebrate eye wired backwards. Human eye wired backward. And then you look over here, friggin' mollusks. They don't even have a friggin' spine. Goddamn mollusks. Fuck them all. They've got the octopus eye It is correctly wired. No blind spot.
Oh, the blind spot?
Correct. I'm over here friggin' jealous. I want the no blind spot eye. But can I get it?
No.
Because I have to get rid of my eye. And that...
That's
Okay. No, I don't. You know what? I'm jealous. Give me some octopus eye. But that would mean that in order to go backwards in evolution, we have to lose our eyes and start over again. And that would mean we'd be less selected. You see? It would make us less evolved. So we can never get a better eye. We have to live with trying to improve the eye we have through natural selection, which is what has happened. And that's what's so friggin' amazing. So here we go. Love that. I just love that finally for me proved evolution. I finally understood it. You work with what you get. It's not better or worse. It's just what you get.
Wait, you don't write anything down after conversation?
This is Pocket. I didn't go anywhere without it.
Right, next up. In 1859, my hero, Charles Darwin, published his theory of evolution by natural selection. Now, even to this day, some people still contest that theory, often giving the eye as an excellent example of something far too complex and perfect to have evolved from scratch. Well, I'm on a mission to prove Darwin right. Eons ago, animals had to bump into things to...
What did she just say that was entirely wrong? I'm on a mission to prove Darwin right. Is that good science?
No.
Remember, pop science and real science are not the same. The video is really hard to see if we don't have the lights on.
What's the name?
maybe we need octopus.
I'll put a link up for this too.
know what they were. Imagine the benefits if they could develop an awareness of food before actually stumbling upon it, or of predators lurking nearby.
Oh my God, we're running out of time again.
Evolution has given us the perfect tool for this.
All right, the video's too long for it. All right, you guys, listen. Make sure you get on the roll. I will see you all tomorrow for the last day of the week. We'll see octopus, the beautiful eyes tomorrow.
Are you gonna bring an octopus?